Transparency and trust between the police and the community needs to happen. We're out here because of the broken trust between the police and the community. And really all we want is to be policed the same way everybody else is policed. There's an economic divide here in Charlotte, but I don't know if there's a racial divide between the police. Our police chief, this one and the previous one, actually have done a pretty good job of helping the people in Charlotte. It's just that at times when there are unarmed black citizens, they die, and there's no reason for them to die.
No justice, no peace. Whose streets? Our streets. Whose streets? Our streets. Whose streets? Our streets.
I'm here to support Black Lives Matter. We want the full video and we demand the full video. It's incredible that we all get a night like this. It is just amazing. We are all here together to support Keep Scott.
China has announced the world's largest radio telescope actually is soon to begin operations. Officials say final touches are being made now to the 500-meter aperture spherical telescope, or FAST. The dish is set to begin its hunt for alien life. The massive radio telescope took 5 years to be constructed, and the total project cost $180 million. During the production process, it became a tourist spot in Guizhou province because people like to see one of the world's biggest telescopes. Chinese authorities say the country's space program will include putting a man on the moon by 2036 and building a space station.
In Syria, there's little hope that a broken ceasefire will be revived. Since late last week, Russian and Syrian warplanes and troops have been hammering Syria's largest city, Aleppo. Elizabeth Palmer was in Aleppo when the attacks resumed.
At the start of the week, we were watching a student party from a rooftop when the war reignited. Those are shells falling on rebel-held Aleppo, just after the Syrian army declared the ceasefire was over. Soon, the warplanes were up too, bombing. The number of dead and wounded, which had fallen to almost zero, rocketed up. The front line of this civil war runs right through the center of Aleppo. Armed opposition fighters control this side, and Syrian regime forces and their allies are here. 13-year-old Aya lives on the very edge of the government side.
This curtain here, what's that for?
There are here snipers.
The snipers, just a few hundred yards away, are opposition fighters who, over the past 4 years, have aimed their weapons at Syrian army positions deep in this neighborhood.
Did you lose some friends in this war?
Oh yes, I've lost many, she says. Some were killed by mortars or snipers. Some just left the country. Many of those who didn't make a run for it are now living in the ruins of war in desperate need. The ceasefire was supposed to let humanitarian aid reach them, but the main delivery route into Aleppo has been a battleground for months. To let the aid flow, all sides, including the Syrian army, were supposed to pull back. And it never did, because the negotiations to secure the road failed. In a war this savage, it's hard to sort fact from fiction. And it got even harder this week when a U.S. airstrike hit Syrian soldiers. By mistake, said the Pentagon. A few days later, a Red Crescent aid convoy was attacked.
You see, bombers, as aid, bombers, aid from the UN.
The U.S. says early indications showed the Russians were responsible, something Moscow furiously denied. But public opinion in this country is shaped by Syrian state media, and the villain on its airwaves is always the United States.
Syrians also believe that America can make a big difference to the outcome of this war, and that the U.S. has a responsibility to use its diplomatic muscle and its power to help bring peace. Elizabeth Palmer, CBS News, Damascus.
This is AP News Minute. Miami Marlins pitcher Jose Fernandez was killed in a boating accident early Sunday. The 24-year-old escaped Cuba to become one of baseball's brightest stars. Authorities say Fernandez and 2 other people died when their 32-foot vessel slammed into a jetty off Miami Beach. The UN Special Envoy to Syria says the international community should not give up on the possibility of Russia and the United States working out a plan to deal with the ongoing crisis in Syria. He told reporters on Sunday that Russia has a strong capacity to influence the situation on the ground as well as the Syrian government. Protests in Charlotte remain peaceful for another night after the release of police video of a man's shooting death at the hands of officers. There have been marches each night since Keith Lamont Scott was shot to death Tuesday by police. The royal family arrived in Canada on Saturday for their first official trip overseas as a family of 4. Britain's Princess Charlotte, Prince George, and their parents Prince William and Kate will visit British Columbia and the Yukon. Christopher Fourier, Associated Press, with AP News Minute.
The one constant in this violently unpredictable conflict is that neither side will win, and therefore both ultimately will lose. And above all, Syrian people are going to lose, and they are losing their lives day by day. All we can expect from Aleppo, if the Syrian government is indeed intent of retaking it completely, it is, and that's a military analysis done by many competent people more than us, is going to be a slow, grinding, street-by-street fight over the course of months, if not years, whereby the ancient city will be almost completely destroyed. In the face of these illusions of imminent victory, I must reiterate what we now believe to be an almost self-evident truth, but a truth that doesn't seem to be actually implemented. A so-called military solution or victory in Syria is impossible, including in Aleppo.
It is time to say who is carrying out those airstrikes and who is killing civilians. Russia holds a permanent seat on the UN Security Council. This is a privilege and it is a responsibility. Yet in Syria and in Aleppo, Russia is abusing this historic privilege. And while members of this council, certainly including the United States, have a deep interest in having constructive ties with the Russian Federation, history will not look kindly on those council members who stay silent in the face of this carnage. Nobody has to convince the United States of America of the danger posed by terrorists. Our citizens are often priority targets all around the world. But when Russia is espousing fiction, we have to call that out. What Russia is sponsoring and doing is not counterterrorism, it is barbarism.
Everybody's a criminal, right? Right. All you gotta do is have a reason to feel like it, right? Because y'all police, y'all We are not going to go
over to Atlanta, Georgia, joined by the managing editor of Veterans Today, Mr. Jim W. Dean. Thank you so much for being with us. Well, Mr. Dean, tell us, how do you see what Russia is basically saying, that there is no way that a ceasefire can take place without all sides coming to the table? And he definitely showed some concerns and some doubts whether the United States is really willing to play fair and really want a solution to this. How do you see it, sir?
Well, you're exactly right. In fact, we may have the birth of a new phrase here, a spin-off from the old theater of the absurd to the ceasefire of the absurd. And we can also tie that together with something from the old Palestinian conflict, is that the Palestinians never had a partner for peace, something that the Israelis used to spin on them. And we've seen this now several times, and tremendously so in the last one, because we had a secret agreement, which the U.S. didn't really want the public to know what they had agreed to, so that if they violated it, it would not be obvious to everybody, which we've now learned that they have. But they've got this situation where they did not have any penalties for people who were violating the ceasefire. So anybody that says they want to sign up to the ceasefire and put their name on the list and then go ahead and start shelling or doing anything they want to do, there's no penalty for them to do it. So obviously they look at that the U.S. has left that in there so that they can do that. And both sides, the U.S. held Russia responsible for making Damascus hold up to the ceasefire, but the U.S. never accepted any responsibility for its own proxy forces. So we have this unbelievable situation where at least Russia's finally stood up and said, look, unless you can guarantee ahead of time that your groups are going to sign up, there's really no way we can start another ceasefire because we know you're just going to use it to reinforce your own forces.
And looking at what is going on, your take on this situation with the Nostra Front terrorists. Now, Russia is saying there has to be some type of division. How do you see what's happening on that side of things? Can they actually, I'm talking about Moscow and Washington, come to some type of agreement in dealing with these, with the division of these different groups?
Frankly, I think it's a deal killer, and for this reason. The only way that the U.S. has any pressure in the peace talks whatsoever is to have some military advantage against the Syrian government, to have them be willing to give Assad up, to have some kind of resolution. And the only way they can get that is the only significant force on the ground to contest the Syrian army are the jihadi al-Nusra folks. And the Syrian army knows this, that they have absolutely no chance of contesting the Syrian army without the firepower and the trained, really well-trained people in al-Nusra. And the proof of that is the U.S. will not even agree to have this new al-Nusra group deemed a terrorist organization, which on one hand it says it is, but it won't have them deemed that way, because that requires legal responsibilities, and then also Russia's free to bomb them. So it's a flagrantly dishonest situation. And one of the big evil aspects of this is the Western press has been not even covering this issue. What a hoax of having a protective, the strongest terrorist and biggest military force is being given cover by the U.S. While blaming all of the ceasefire violations on Russia. And everybody's really getting tired of it. So the Russians has a lot of support now. If they will stand up to the U.S. and say we're going to need some outside monitors because the U.S. cannot be trusted to anything that it says it agrees to.
All right, thank you so much for being with us, Mr. Jim W. Dean, Managing Editor of Veterans Today.
For more on these stories and the latest shooting incidents in the U.S., we're joined by Jody Grage, from the Green Party of the United States, and she's joining us live from Seattle. Mr. Grage, thank you so much. Ms. Grage, thank you so much for being with us. So, talking of shooting incidents in the U.S., 2 shootings in a span of 2 days, and these are just 2 incidents that we have learned about. Some interesting figures, like firearms were used to kill over 13,000 people in the U.S. last year in 2015. And despite concerns, the U.S. Congress has prohibited the Centers for Disease Control from conducting research that advocates in favor of gun control. What is the reason?
Well, the reason is largely money. The gun lobby is alive and very well here in the United States, and there is a lot of lobbying money going into the halls of power in Washington, D.C. There is a lot of talk about rights, but the people have a right to live without the fear of violence. It is very sad, and it's hard to feel angry and sad at the same time, but that is how we feel. You have to have a license to drive a car. There are few restrictions on on the ownership and use of guns. There are assault rifles which have no purpose except to kill large groups of people that are permitted to be bought. It's a very unreal situation. I would like to point out that Connecticut has the strictest gun laws in the state that were passed not all that long ago, and their homicide and suicide rates have both fallen dramatically. It is hard to imagine why the administration at the federal level will not do anything to relieve the suffering of people in the United States. It's just unfathomable.
Indeed, Ms. Grage, when we think about the statistics and the figures and the shooting incidents that happen each year across the United States, in different states, there have been many cases that a large number of people have been gunned down. One comes to think, is the gun lobby really that strong that no one can do anything about it? No legislation can be passed to control gun ownership? And come to think of it, when the Congress wants to prevent and stop any research that might favor gun control, is there any hope in the future that things will change?
Part of the problem is that there is a vast array of possibilities for easing the problem with gun ownership. As I say, there are guns that are specifically designed for no other purpose than to kill large groups of human beings. They have nothing to do with self-defense. They have nothing to do with hunting. And yet we are told that we have a constitutional right to own these guns. It seems to me there's a larger constitutional right to be safe. As long as the gun lobby has a lot of money, and as long as the senators and representatives are willing to accept this money, and which gives the gun lobby more access to their I would say reason, but that may be the wrong word to use in this case. The people come last, and this is true on many things, but the problem with guns and the devastation that they cause is simply a tremendously blatant example of how our government is not taking care of people.
Ms. Grage, thank you so much for your time and your thoughts. That was Jody Grage from the Green Party of the United States joining us out of Seattle.